Hey everybody, welcome to my presentation. I'm Dr. Jeff Skolnick and I'm going to talk to you today about the SatoriWest Method. So let me explain to you what the SatoriWest Method is in general. The word Satori is a Japanese Buddhist word for enlightenment. And when I use the word Satori, what I'm really referring to is all of sort of Eastern thought or Buddhism that talks about the bliss and meaning and fulfillment that humans are capable of. That is enlightenment. But they also talk about the suffering, the misery, and the crises that go along with being human and how you go from one to the other. That's all Eastern thought. The West part of the word Satori West is about the brain and how the brain suffers and how the brain gets enlightened and experiences its highest happiness. So this puts together my background in three areas. I am a 40-year Zen Buddhist meditator and teacher. I'm also someone who's studied the brain on a separate track where I was in a doctorate program in neuropsychology where I did brain research. I'm also a psychiatrist. And the third track brings in my doctorate in wellness, which you'll see later on is important. So I've written books about the SatoriWest Method, and I've done speaking, and I've created the SatoriWest curriculum and programs that you can find more about at SatoriWest.com. So there are 5 points to the SatoriWest Method, and it's important that people go through each of these 5 points or more recognitions of what is already happening in their brain. And as they recognize each part and then do some of the practices, that's how you kind of take this journey from unhappiness and suffering to the highest levels of happiness and meaning and fulfillment that your brain is capable of. So the first point is the human condition, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And the second point is tunnel vision, which you'll also learn about. And the third point is perspective. That's the highest part of the spectrum. And then the method itself is how you go from one to the other, and then why crises are opportunities. All right, let's jump right in. So the human condition. So this is important to understand and grasp for yourself, because it's called the human condition because no one is exempt from it. So just starting with birth, we start from a womb that's warm and safe and protected. We don't have to breathe, we don't have to eat. We're just there in comfort, and then we're cast out into a world that's cold, where we have to cry and gasp for air and cry to get our food. So the human condition starts right there. And when you think about childhood, no parents are perfect. Childhoods are difficult. Siblings compete with you. Children's feelings get hurt easily. It's very hard to raise human children at best. And at worst, many parents can be horrible. So then you enter right into adolescence, where children are anxious. They're competing to fit in. No one feels like they really fit in. People are either bullied or being bullied. A lot of that happens in adolescence, right before you get into the struggles of being a teenager and rebelling and pushing away your parents and pushing away the childhood that, at least in some level, was innocent. And you're so desperate to reach adulthood, and then boom, like a wall, the adult stresses hit you of how to make a living or go to school or raise children, how to pay taxes and organize your finances and keep your home safe and keep your car in shape. And then you hit your 30s and you start realizing, oh my God, this denial of my life that I was in is really, you're faced with that, the fact that you're getting older. that things are changing. And then you hit your 40s and your 50s, and you start going into a midlife crisis because you start losing abilities and functions. And then all through life, people die. We lose pets. We lose familiar places that we've loved and known. We have medical conditions. We have disabilities. We have psychiatric disability. We have chemical dependencies and all kinds of addictions that we all face. Even if you fall and injure something, it really sets you back. And so all of these things from birth on are being kind of accumulated. They're being swept forward. And even though you have good moments in your life, and certainly we try to distract ourselves as much as possible to keep from feeling this kind of rising tide of waves of kind of life crises. And then you hit old age where you start really losing functions, and there's a sense of loss of dignity and self-control and self-mastery. And then of course life does hit you with other traumas along the way, either natural or human-made. The point being that life is a rising tide of suffering and of difficulty that we accumulate throughout our lives. And yet, you might look out at a people sitting in a cafe or in a Pepsi commercial, and they look so happy. They're floating on a sea of their human condition. Everybody, unless you learn how to unwind it, which a small segment of the population does. So understand your human condition, because that will provide you fuel for the journey of the SatoriWest Method. It also motivates you to take it in the first place, because if you just try to deny that you're experiencing that, and you constantly are trying to distract yourself from it, you won't be motivated to unwind it. So all the things that you see on the screen for why we enter into the human condition are actually not the real reason why we stress in life and why we suffer. We stress and suffer in life because our brain is configured for survival. Now, like all animals, from reptiles way up to primates and mammals and primates, brains are, through evolution, survival machines. They excel at surviving. So what do brains do in general to survive? Is that when they see something that they want, or that they notice or perceive or experience what they don't want, their attention gets focused on it. And that works great for other animals. There's a glitch in it for humans. So for instance, you see some chocolate cake and your attention focuses on the chocolate cake. That starts to a series of issues that create tunnel vision, which we'll talk about in a moment. So similar to chocolate cake, you might see someone that you're sexually attracted to, and that will draw your attention. You might see alcohol if you have had a positive experience with alcohol in the past, and that will grab your attention. In another vein, if you see a dog growling at you that you're afraid of, that will grab your attention. If you're on some plexiglass and standing up on a height and you have a fear of heights, that will grab your attention. If you're afraid of needles and about to get a vaccination, that will grab your attention. So it's not just things in your physical environment. It's also what's going on in your head too, as objects that can also grab your attention. For instance, you could have a thought of what I have to do tomorrow, or studying for a test, for instance. Those things can also grab your attention and you focus on them. We also have an imagination. So not only can we get attracted to a piece of chocolate cake, we can imagine right now chocolate cake and all the smells and tastes that go along with eating it. So we can not only pay attention to what we want in life, but we can imagine the ideal thing that we want in life. We can also imagine the worst case scenario. We walk up to the top of a mountain, we can imagine falling off, and that can grab our attention too. And the other thing about humans in particular is that we have a sense of I, a sense of self, a sense of me. And that is actually an object that we can also pay attention to. And so taken together, all of these things grab our attention. Sometimes whether we want to or not, and sometimes we freely give our attention over to things. So there are 8 facets of tunnel vision that warp the mind. And it isn't necessary that you memorize these. There are places on our website, and also I have a book. And so just try to get the gist of what I'm going to tell you about these 8 facets of tunnel vision, because if you recognize them in yourself in the many ways that they show up, there's a power in that. So the first thing is obviously attention is grabbed or given over. So your attention is grabbed either because like a ball comes at your face and you notice it instantly, or you see someone naked running outside and your attention just, wow, what is that? Kind of gets grabbed by that or compelled. Or if you're checking out a crowd to see who you know, because you're a stranger, or you're looking to see who's attractive to you, you can give your attention over. So, or if you hear a strange noise outside, your attention can be focused on that. So tunnel vision is really what happens next. And all the other 7 facets happen at the same time, but I divide them up artificially so that we can kind of explore them one at a time. And the next thing that happens is a loss of self-control. So if you're looking at that chocolate cake, the more you stare it down, the greater the chance is that you're either going to eat it or you're going to interact with it in some way. You might just have to push it away. But it's not just a neutral object any longer. It takes control from you. It's kind of like a stimulus response mechanism in your brain that gets set up. So if you see a dog growling at you, you might start running before you even realize the dog is on a leash. The other thing is that the more you focus on an object, the less you're aware of anything else. And that has some problems associated with it, especially if you live in tunnel vision, which we all do. We're like Tarzan swinging through the jungle, going from one vine to the next without ever letting go. We're always in some degree of tunnel vision. And so you miss the subtle things around you that are maybe subtle but sublime and beautiful. You deny things that you just really don't want to see. The other interesting aspect of tunnel vision is that it makes you more suggestible. You start believing whatever you perceive or whatever you think. So, I mean, for instance, a hypnotist, if they got you to look at a swinging watch and they tell you that you're freezing cold, even if the room is warm, you'll start getting goosebumps and feeling cold all over. If you're, say, looking at a random ink blot and your attention is focused on it and you see that ink blot as a butterfly, the longer you stare at it as a butterfly, you're going to start to believe that it's actually a picture of a butterfly, even though it's just a random ink blot. Whatever is in your mind, if you have a thought that you focus on, you're going to start to accept that thought as true. That's an important aspect. The other is that your imagination starts to work overtime and gets mixed up with reality, so that you're not really in the moment the way it is. you fantasize about the moment while you're in it. And that also has you kind of feeling like you're living in a really limited world. Um, One of the most significant aspects of tunnel vision is that it heightens your sense of self, that ego. And so that looks like a lot of different things. For instance, when your ego is heightened, you tend to take things personally that are not necessarily personal. Like if you see someone walking in the street and they give you a difficult look or a look of disgust, it may not be about you. It maybe there's just an accident, or maybe they are looking at you, but it really is more about them. So heightened ego can also look like someone who feels better than other people. It also looks like someone who feels worse than everybody, who feels lesser than other people. It's also someone who is competitive, who compares themselves a lot, who blames themselves for things. That heightened ego, that way of experiencing reality through the lens of a sense of self that is now kind of magnified, what that does is it distorts your thinking. So that heightened ego, the way it thinks is that I know it's truth, and the way I think about things is right. So it tends to, for instance, see things as all or nothing, black or white. It has a sense of the way things should be, the way things ought to be or have to be. And you sort of start insisting that things are the way you think that they should be. That's similar to having your imagination kind of projected onto reality and becoming more suggestible because you believe your own thoughts and beliefs. A distorted way of thinking also has you feel like you know what's going to happen. You're absolutely certain for a fact you know what the future holds. Whether it's 5 minutes from now or a year from now, you become absolutely convinced. That's one of the reasons why people who get depressed and get into tunnel vision think that they're always going to be depressed. They're just absolutely certain of it. There's no doubt at all. They're highly suggestible, and that's the way they think. The last aspect of tunnel vision is that it, along with everything else, it distorts your sense of time so that you experience the present as if you were actually in the past. So if someone reminds you of someone from the past, you're going to act as if they're that person, even though they're not that person from the past. So you project aspects of the past. You can, people who go home adults who go home to their parents' house for holidays sometimes feel like they're a kid again. And that either feels good or it doesn't feel good, but it's a form of tunnel vision. So those are the 8 facets of tunnel vision. So let me try to give you a few more examples of how that might manifest. So think of the various objects of experience that we talked about. So just start with the chocolate cake. So again, the hungrier you are, the more motivated, the more powerful you feel towards an object, the more it grabs your attention, the more it blocks anything else out. That's all you can feel, all you can smell, all you can think of about is that chocolate cake. You're likely going to either eat it or get sick from it and have to throw it away. It's not just a neutral object. You become more suggestible. You believe that it's something that you have to eat, or that it's something that belongs to you. That ego expands. It's either about you or not about you. Your chocolate cake, it belongs to you. Your thoughts get distorted. Either should not eat it or should eat it. But in either case, it causes you to focus your attention on it and to have to interact with it. Similarly, if you're afraid of needles, you're going to you can look at a needle coming at you, you can get so freaked out, you can actually run away or swat at the nurse trying to give it to you. You can become more suggestible, thinking that you're going to die or that the pain's going to be unbearable. Your imagination can get away from you, and you can start, imagining the pain in your arm before you even get the needle into your arm. Your ego can expand, and you can believe that having a vaccination is a sign that it's about you and you're being ill or not being ill. It can distort your thoughts. You should never have to feel pain. You should never have to have vaccinations, and eventually you wind up not even having a vaccination that you desperately need. So if you think about sexual objects, people have a way of violating their own morality because they go into tunnel vision around sexual objects or around drugs or alcohol. Or you might run from a dog that is growling at you when it's better to stand there and show confidence or decide that running is not the best strategy. Maybe closing a gate or protecting yourself in some other way, or just seeing the dog for what it is. Maybe it's in pain. It's not growling at you. Maybe it's not personal. There are many different ways that tunnel vision affects these various objects, whether the object is a thought or a mental image or something in your imagination or even your sense of self. So say you're at a party and everyone is dressed in tuxedos and gowns, and you come in with a casual, shirt and jeans, and you get self-conscious. Your tunnel vision will make you feel like you are from a different planet. And so you'll start to focus on other people and yourself and your feelings, all kind of the package of tunnel vision. So there are obviously different degrees of tunnel vision. So tunnel vision can progress so severely that you go into crisis, where you think and you experience things in ways that actually put you at danger to yourself or other people. People who are suicidal have such distorted sense of ego, for instance, where they feel like they're just such less than every other person on the planet. They feel like they're just on the outside of a perfect life looking in, or that they're the center of the universe, that they become suicidal. And they do things that they would never normally do. I've worked with many patients who attempted suicide, and for whatever reason it didn't succeed. And I asked them, well, what about your children? Or what about that you have this going for you or that going for you? And they're like, I don't know. I just wasn't in my right state of mind. And when I explained that they were in tunnel vision, they're like, oh, yeah, that's not me. I was just someone else. So toxic level of tunnel vision is where you just go through life kind of stuck in a particular type of tunnel vision, like you either kind of arrogant or you have low self-esteem, or you're always kind of interrupting people because you don't allow yourself to kind of stop yourself from being impulsive. Cultural tunnel vision is where we all kind of share a similar type of tunnel vision in modern or even in ancient cultures, where we want approval from other people, we want to be liked. It's where we may always seek after immediate gratification, and that's seen as normal. Everyone would eat chocolate cake the second they see it, or anyone would want to go after, always after a better future, whatever. And so the other end of the spectrum is perspective, that we'll talk about right now. So this is an image of the universe. As far as I'm concerned, you could travel throughout the galaxy and throughout all of the billions of galaxies out there, and you will not find anything as astonishing as the human brain. I mean, all brains are astonishing, and the human brain in particular is so, and it's not just because we have this incredible intelligence and ability to think or creativity. In my opinion, it has to do with one particular aspect of the human brain. And that aspect arises because of a unique phenomenon that's not unusual to humans, but is taken to a very high degree in humans. And that is that we don't have one brain in our head, we have two. Each brain has a separate awareness. So if you cut the tracks that allow them to communicate with each other and you give information to one side, the other side won't know what that information was. It has a separate awareness. They have separate ways of experiencing the moment, separate types of ways of experiencing emotions, that kind of thing. When those two halves, so those two halves already are aware of each other. And when they are aware of each other, that's what gives you what's known as self-awareness, or you could say that roughly that's the ability to know that you're alive each moment. So if I were to ask you right now, do you know that you're alive? You would say, yeah, I know I'm alive. So, but that, if that back and forth awareness were accentuated even more, it literally wakes you up even more to what it means that you're alive. And so when we learn to train the brain on each other, on itself, you sort of let go of the things that normally grab your attention, specifically carve up the moment. And you realize this kind of center of aliveness, of knowing that you know, and everything else just becomes more in the background. And I call that process brain shifting. So brain shifting takes a little while to learn how to do that, but it starts with very basic mindfulness and then can sort of naturally expand from there. So when the brain learns to shift, or when the brain is shifted, it causes what I refer to as perspective. So perspective is what I just said. It's when your awareness is wide. It's all the opposite things that we talked about in tunnel vision. It's where your awareness is wide. You feel kind of really anchored in aliveness and knowing about this moment. You have greater self-control to the point that you can be spontaneous. You can flow through the moment rather than being impulsive and doing things without thinking. It's like you know on a deep level what is the right thing to do each moment. And you also can stop yourself from doing things. It makes you open-minded, less gullible. You can look at that random ink blot, see it as a butterfly, but then you can see it as other things very easily and just always know it's an ink blot. You don't take anything personally, or definitely you're not as touchy about things. You don't feel when that tunnel vision, the expanded ego, when the ego doesn't expand, it actually contracts and sometimes can fall away into the background. You feel connected to other people. You feel connected to the world around you. You realize that nothing is personal, and so you can see people and things and events for what they are, not what you imagine they are or what they say about you. You become more logical in your thinking and reality-based, and you can see the bigger picture. So let me give you an example of tunnel vision and perspective. So say there's someone who is screaming at you, and they're like, you are a dirty, rotten, whatever, and they're just yelling at you. What normally will happen, because it's your powerful survival programming, is that you could instantly pay attention to them and block out anything else except for them. And that's when tunnel vision kicks in. There's a loss of control. You may feel like you want to either punch them or throw something at them or walk away in disgust. You won't be aware of anything else happening around you except that you and that person. And tunnel vision includes the person as well as the feelings and the thoughts. It's all kind of a package of tunnel vision. It makes you more suggestible so that you will start to believe what they say is true, that that you are what they say, what he says you are, or you will believe that he is an absolute threat to you. The whole picture becomes more believable. Your imagination gets mixed with reality, and you start to imagine that this person could attack you, even though that's not realistic necessarily. Your ego expands, and you take it terribly personally. You feel like maybe you already thought you were superior, and that this is challenging you, or you already thought you were inferior, and this is just more evidence of it. Your thoughts get distorted. You feel like no one should ever talk to me that way, ever, ever, or that this person is either evil or they're not evil, that kind of thing. And time can get distorted in that they may remind you of someone from your past who treated you badly, even maybe a bully in school or your parents or something like that, and you'll start to kind of regress and experience them as if they're in the present. So what happens if you open awareness, feel a little bit sense of aliveness that anchors you to the moment? Is you start to experience perspective, where you get more self-control. You may spontaneously know how to set limits or what to say. You'll notice people standing around you. You'll notice that person with a wider picture. For instance, you're not just seeing someone who's screaming at you and calling you names, but you can step back and go like, wow, that person really has a problem. In other words, it's not just what's going on in your imagination. You become more open-minded, less gullible, less convincible. Again, you're grounded in reality. You don't take it personally, and you can logically think it through. And so once you can say like, wow, what is their problem? You can actually maybe you feel sorry for them, for someone who's so angry, because it doesn't bother you. There's no ego to protect. Does that make sense? The difference between tunnel vision and perspective? It's a small example, but it can be powerful if it prevents you from going into crisis over something. Even something in your own mind, your own imagination can create the same type of situation. So here's an example from my own life. Not long ago, I was the chief medical officer of a hospital. I had a lot of responsibilities, and that day I was getting ready for work, and I had a kind of a significant presentation to do to all the senior management of the facility. So I was thinking about what am I going to say and how my presentation goes so that they'll approve of me and they'll like me, which is aspects of tunnel vision. I want to be seen as doing a good job. And then I got in my car on time to drive to work to the meeting, and thinking of all the things I had to do that day, I was kind of lost in my own head, my own imagination, my own ego, thinking of anything except the present. Thinking of what happened yesterday at a meeting, or what medical staff weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. I was anywhere except here and now. And then ahead of me, I see red taillights start coming on as if the traffic is slowing down. And immediately I realized that if this could mean that I'm not going to be on time to the meeting, because this is an unusual traffic pattern. And I started to get anxious. I started to look at the other drivers in a more competitive way. Like they were all kind of blocking me, and then some guy cut in front of me, and I started to get angry at him and thinking, God, that so-and-so. And then this traffic started to get even slower. I started kind of getting a little bit anxious and thinking, I'm going to be late to that meeting. How late am I going to be? And what are they going to think of me? And are they going to walk out in disgust and think that I'm always someone who's always late? Or will my boss who's there disapprove of me? And I started to even catastrophize, like I might even get fired for this, or just be kind of, they would laugh at me and think that I'm just irresponsible. And it got to the point where I started to drive more aggressively, swinging in and out of traffic, getting more frantic. And then it occurred to me, because it was such an unusual state, that I was in tunnel vision. And I was like, okay, after 40 years of meditation, I realized I could be more in the moment. And I opened my awareness. I felt more grounded in the present, and I could see the other cars in a different way. I felt I was more connected, like we were all in traffic together. I started to realize there are other people here who may be in a worse situation than me. Maybe they have a medical appointment. Maybe they're late to work and they really could get fired, because I wasn't going to get fired for this. And so I felt a certain sense of love and a certain sense of compassion, and I felt a belonging. I started to think more rationally, like, well, what is the worst thing that can happen? They're probably a little worried about me if I'm late, and we'll reschedule it. Traffic happens. They know that, and I know that. I also started to really appreciate my car and how amazing this modern vehicle is. It has electronics, it has a comfortable seat, and oh, aren't I lucky I have a car and I have a job? And then I started to look around and look at the clouds, and the traffic was on a part of the road here where I could see the ocean, and I started to kind of get a natural high. And the traffic eventually stopped. It went so slow that it stopped, and I was just really happy. Was it a state of bliss? I was kind of bordering on that. I was happy. I was not in a rush, and I was grateful that the traffic stopped so that I could stop driving and just be in that moment the way my perspective had opened up. And so that is an example of tunnel vision, cultural tunnel vision, turning into almost crisis tunnel vision, and then opening up to perspective, different degrees of perspective. So what perspective gives you a few things is that you feel more amazed and grateful, not just for your life and everything in it, but just for the moment, for your experience of each moment. It lets you see things in context so that you can be wiser and more mature about how you evaluate events. It gives you a sense of irony and sense of humor. It lets you have more compassion and empathy for other people and even for yourself. It lets you be more, because you don't care about approval, you can express your emotions, sadness, you can cry, you can laugh. You're not all self-conscious, and so you can be more authentic and emotionally expressive. You can also, it lets you be more intuitive and creative. And I don't know if you've heard of flow, but it lets you be more spontaneous in how you move through each moment of your life. And ultimately, you become in love with your own existence, with your own life, and you realize what a miracle it is that you're able to be in it. So that's pretty wide perspective. So perspective has degrees too. There's mild perspective, which is where I just realize, oh my gosh, I'm in tunnel vision. And then the moderate degree of perspective, where I started to not feel competitive with the other drivers and feel connected like I'm part of traffic. And then awakened perspective, where, it gets into the realm of feeling so connected that there is no you and that you're just really one with the universe and amazed by existence itself. So how do you go from tunnel vision to perspective? Well, that is the method itself, the SatoriWest Method. And so there are 4 paths. Here are 3 of them. 1, as I said, just recognize when you're in tunnel vision. So study those 8 facets, because you're going to see them show up in different ways, in different places, and different times. The other is, the more you condition your brain to brain shift. So when I realized I was in tunnel vision, I didn't just stop there. I allowed my brain to open up awareness. So I applied my brain shifting. But I also meditate every morning, and I have for 40 years. And I've gone to multiple retreats, and so that has also taught my brain I've taught my brain how to shift on its own. The other very important facet that I won't spend too much time with today is that there are ways for your brain to shift on its own without any conscious desire to make it shift from these 6 spheres of wellness. So for instance, if your brain is an organ, it's a physical organ. It's a mental organ, it's a tribal organ, it's an organ of intelligence, it's an organ that has all these different spheres in it. But as a physical organ, if you take good care of your brain by taking care of your body, by eating right, by getting rest, by getting sleep, taking medications if you need it, seeing physicians so that you can feel more energized and relaxed, you're going to feel more alive, and you're going to have more perspective. You won't take things as personally because you're feeling physically better. In terms of mental wellness, if you know your personality, you know your ego, you know what your childhood has been and where you've gotten your human condition from, and you know your issues, that insight itself, we can get that from therapy, you can just get that from just self-knowledge, that insight into your mind gives you perspective. In terms of social wellness, if you bring love into your life, if you know how to set limits, if you have a community and you have connections, that itself just naturally gives your life perspective. If your life is organized, if in the realm of organizational, or we sometimes call cultural wellness, if your finances are in order, if you've planned for the future, if you're in sync with the popular culture, that all gives you a sense of perspective. Very importantly, in terms of moral wellness, moral wellness are principles or precepts or guidelines to perspective itself that kind of give you sort of guardrails. So if you have the morality to be a kind person, then for instance, when I was driving aggressively and I would think, oh, that's not my morality to do that, it would kind of naturally kind of limit my tunnel vision. So being kind, being honest, having integrity, not abusing people or things or intoxicants, all those are moral guidelines that keep you with a certain degree of perspective, realizing that every guideline has balance to it. In the realm of existential wellness, just things that have you appreciate your existence. So even in just a normal secular realm, practicing gratitude, reciting what you're grateful for kind of just makes the moment kind of pop and come alive. Seeing beauty and art in things that are beautiful and artistic, but also seeing beauty in things that are mundane and a rusty nail and the patterns on that kind of thing. Also, existential wellness is often called spiritual wellness. It has a lot to do with if you are religious, believing in God, or studying science or physics, anything that puts your existence into greater perspective naturally shifts your brain. So if you practice all those 6 spheres of wellness at the same time, that can be really powerful. But if you practice it as well as learning about how to manipulate your brain from the inside out, that is the SatoriWest path to great human potential. So we mentioned there were 4 paths, those are 3. The last path, which is what I've already mentioned to you, is that crises can be opportunities. They can take you down, for sure. Like I could have been late to that meeting and gotten so angry and so upset that it could have, first of all, ruined my entire day. But also, maybe I got into an accident myself because I was driving so aggressively. But that crisis, because I know about the SatoriWest method, it keyed me in because cultural tunnel vision is hard to see. I was not seeing my own cultural tunnel vision as I was driving to work and was all stressed out. I only saw it when I got so egregiously unhappy that it became clear to me and I could unwind it to great perspective. So that's one way that crises are opportunities. The other is that sometimes the brain just cannot stand itself. We sometimes stress ourselves out and suffer to the point of such, we either through trauma or something terrible in our lives that the brain just sometimes just opens up on its own. And a great awakening happens. People who've had, war injuries or limbs cut off in battle, or people who've experienced all kind of life trauma, living through hurricanes or sexual trauma, have said for thousands of years that sometimes it shook them up. Unfortunately, that they had to have that happen that way, or even Great Depressions, but it opened them up to the magnitude of their existence. So in a nutshell, that is the SatoriWest method. Because we implemented this method in a psychiatric hospital, and it was so powerful. I want to just show you what learning this method can really mean to you, as it did for people with psychiatric disabilities and conditions and chemical dependency, as a way to motivate you to really take in what I said and really try to look for your own tunnel vision.
This is worth trying. It's worth having the experience.
I'm never going to forget my experience here.
Yeah, it works.
Before you came in, you were really in some degree of crisis.
I was considering suicide.
I was having suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation.
I felt like my problems, no one could understand, and they were so unique to me.
I was very anxious, I was shaking, and I was wanting to take medication.
I don't have to be controlled by it. Like, I can feel those feelings and not act in ways that are toxic.
We would be walking and talking, and I would be talking about how, my life is terrible, and we would realize that it was tunnel vision.
For the first time in my life, I was able to see where I had tunnel vision and got stuck.
It really can explain why I'm so unhappy, just when you focus so tightly on something like my addiction and my heroin use, and that's the cause of all my problems and I'm never going to be happy again. That's all you can see.
I was able to see how I was acting in immature ways.
It's not a happy pill, so to speak. It's almost like a step-by-step guide about how you can work through your problems in life, how you can work through issues with other people. And I had never seen a program like this.
Yesterday we talked about how just to listen to our surroundings and kind of centering ourselves and focusing on the moment. And there's a few times today where I was a little bit anxious and I kind of closed my eyes and took deep breaths and listened to my surroundings and kind of grounded myself and allowed my anxiety to disappear and just focus on the moment instead of focusing on what's not going right.
We meditate every day, and I have never meditated before in my life. And meditation for me has really helped me to bring peace into my life.
Going through all the things that I'm grateful for, I could identify like ways that things could be like way worse for me too. Not only do I have stuff to be grateful for, but there are things that could be worse, and I need to be okay with if that happened, you know. If things did get worse, that I'd still have stuff that I could be grateful for.
Perspective is getting to basically the end of a problem where you've really opened up your thinking and allowed other alternatives in your life.
Somehow something broke through. Something broke through to that core.
It's really helped me recenter myself and feel more at peace with myself and with my mind.
Riding the waves of the emotions instead of trying to just fight them all the time.
Yeah.
Just letting myself feel it.
I'm ready to leave the program, and I'm like a giddy kid again.
If you could just widen your perspective a bit and not get so focused on the terrible and what's happening now, you might have a chance of pulling through. And if I could pull through, anybody can pull through.
That I'm not stuck in my life.
I think that this is the beginning for me.
It's not just a run-of-the-mill experience here. It really has changed my life.
Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you want to learn more about the SatoriWest Method, join us at SatoriWest.com. Thanks for your time.